On a clear Sunday afternoon of June 12, 1898, in the town of Cavite Viejo, present-day Cavi, Emilio Aguinaldo waved the Philippine national flag before cheering crowds for the first time. For many, this day signaled the end of the 333 years of Spanish colonization. It was a euphoric culmination of the revolution that started less than 2 years prior. A revolution that spilt the blood of many revolutionaries, both in the hands of the colonizers and of their fellow Filipinos. It was the beginning of a government that would be led by the people it ought to represent and serve. But 1898 was hardly a break from the struggle. It beckoned a continuation of the fight for self-determination that would go on for years. For others, it would end in a series of surrenders. Yet for some, the revolution is unfinished. In the years to come, scholars and students would look back to this day and interrogate what this event truly represents. What did it really do for the people? And what does it really mean to be free? Let us look back to that momentous day of June 12, 1898, through the Declaration of Independence penned by Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista in the 8th episode of Primary Sources and You. This is Podcast, Conversations on Philippine History, Politics, and Society.
Wow, ang bigat nung what does it mean to be free. Parang ka-level siya ng who am I? Ako si Aaron.
Hello, and ako si Lee. And true, napakadaming layers ng usapin ng freedom talaga, no?
And I am Vec, hello sa inyo. At tulad na nabanggit nyo, napakakomplikado talaga ng notions ng freedom, lalo na kung idadagdag yung idea na freedom is relative and one man's freedom is another man's bondage.
True, totoo, I agree. Kasi 'di ba, katulad ng nabanggit ni Lee kanina, maraming layers yung freedom. Like, for example, political freedom does not always equate to economic freedom. So, pwedeng nakakaboto ka nga, pero di ka naman sure kung may kakainin ka mamaya.
Kaya nga di ba ngayon, parang may notion ng freedom from fear versus freedom from want. The former, I think, pertains to freedoms like the freedom of expression, of association, of belief, without the fear of persecution. Tapos, freedom from want naman ay yung freedom from certain insecurities and indignities that come with the lack of economic resources and social safety nets.
Very interesting din talagang pag-usapan yung kahulugan ng kalayaan. Pero para sa episode na to, titingnan natin yung naging kahulugan ng kalayaan para sa mga revolusyonaryo noong sumapit ang June 12, 1898. So for this episode, babalikan natin yung isang napakahalaga pero madalas ay overlooked na dokumento. At ito ay walang iba kundi ang Declaration of Philippine Independence na isnulat hindi ni Emilio Aguinaldo pero ni Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista. So Bautista was advisor to Aguinaldo and was the designated auditor of war. So he was a lawyer and a veteran of the propaganda movement. So looking at the declaration is actually very important. Saka maikli lang siya parang 2,000 words lang yata to, around 4 pages And it actually revealed a lot of things about that particular period in history, about the appraisal of the revolutionaries led by Aguinaldo, about the revolution itself, and even about Philippine history. At the same time, the document actually contains certain details na nakakalimutan na natin.
Nag-strike sa akin yung sinabi ni Vec na, minsan hindi talaga napapansin or hindi binibigyan ng enough na pansin, I think, yung Declaration of Independence as a, foundation document. Kasi pag tinignan mo sa US, yung kanilang document na yan talaga yung soul ng we, the people, yung mga ganyan nila na pronounce. Pero sa atin, parang pag tinanong mo yung mga tao na, nabasa nyo na ba yung Declaration of Independence, parang ang hirap pakahanap ng magsasabi confidently na, oo, yung sinulat ni Rianzares Bautista. Diba? Parang ang hirap nun.
Like, sino si Rianzares Bautista? Diba?
Exactly, diba? So, babalik din tayo talaga dun sa halaga ng pagtingin sa primary sources. It would give us fresh insights about history, and at the same time, binibigyan din niya tayo ng chance to give our own interpretation about certain historical events and periods.
I actually agree kasi naisip ko rin, it's about time na itong pag-aaral ng kasaysayan ay ibalik natin sa primary sources kasi itong primary sources yung connection natin talaga sa nakaraan. At ang maganda rito sa Declaration of Philippine Independence, it's actually available online. So, if you're a student who's trying to study history and want to know more about this particular Philippine historical event, you can actually access it online, pati yung English translation nito.
That's right. And as I was saying, the declaration actually gives us a number of insights, particularly about the psyche of the revolutionaries at this moment, at this period na talagang naramdaman nila that they won, that they succeeded. So, tingnan natin halimbawa kung paano sinimulan ni Bautista yung declaration.
Taking into consideration that their inhabitants, being already weary of bearing the ominous yoke of Spanish domination, on account of the arbitrary arrests and harsh treatment practiced by the civil guard, to the extent of causing death with the connivance and even with express orders of their commanders, who sometimes went to the extreme of ordering the shooting of prisoners under the pretext that they were attempting to escape, in violation of the provisions of the regulations of their corps, which abuses were unpunished, and on account of the unjust deportations, especially those decreed by General Blanco, of eminent personages and of high social position, at the instigation of the Archbishop and friars, interested in keeping them out of the way for their own selfish and avaricious purpose. Deportations which are quickly brought about by a method of procedure more execrable than that of the Inquisition, and which every civilized nation rejects on account of a decision being rendered without a hearing of the persons accused.
This passage is very important kasi it shows the revolutionary historical justification of the revolution. They also identified yung mga specific sectors ng colonial society who were the perpetrators of the abuse. At nabanggit nga yung Guardia Civil, yung Governor General, at yung clergy.
Yeah, so kung babalikan natin yung pinag-uusapan natin kanina sa notion ng freedom, mapapansin din talaga that the revolutionaries at this point were primarily concerned about certain political freedoms and liberties. Tulad nung sinabi kanina, they were yearning for freedom from fear.
That's right. Malinaw para sa mga Filipino revolutionaries in the mold of Bautista and Aguinaldo yung mga liberal values that were first espoused by the propagandists and by the Katipuneros alike. For many reasons, mahalaga talagang ma-reiterate yung point na yan. At nabinanggit na rin ng isang historian na si Jim Richardson about how there was no marked distinction between the values of the propaganda movement and of the Katipunan. Of course, in his works, Richardson would lament how, in the end, both propagandistas and Katipuneros failed to uphold the interests of the common people.
But then again, we have nationalist historians like Teodoro Agancillo who would argue that the Katipunan, in many ways, departed from the reform movement. And the most obvious manifestation of this is the fact that the Katipunan and the revolutionary movement that it created took up arms and envisioned total independence, hindi lang basta-basta reforma na mananatili pa rin yung relationship between Spain and the Philippines.
So obvious na may kita mo din talaga dito yung katulad nung nabanggit na rin natin sa mga previous kwentuhan natin. Yung iba't iba yung perspective ng mga historiador tungkol sa isang particular event. Kaya mahalaga na mabalikan talaga yung primary sources at hanapin sa mga dokumentong ito kung bakit nagkakaroon ng different possible reasons and motivation.
Agreed. And interestingly, in this landmark document that declared the finality of the revolution's victory, the Katipunan was actually left out. And this is very odd kasi they made mention of, the document made mention of Magellan, of Legazpi, they made mention of the execution of the Gumburza, they mentioned Rizal, they even mentioned the United States, but made no mention of the Katipunan. And this actually brings us back to the discussion in the previous episode.
Yeah, it might have something to do with the execution of Bonifacio, but we can only speculate what led to this omission or the decision not to name the Katipunan kahit na nabanggit din naman sa document na August 1896 they started the revolution, and then in the document Bautista proceeds to identify certain events that led to the Declaration of Independence. In fact, once lang mababanggit ang Katipunan, medyo in passing pa at in the latter part of the document. But leaving it out as part of the narration of events that led to independence may indicate an attempt to avoid any issues from arising. And I think this clearly says a lot about the way that Bautista and his cohorts viewed the revolution and its successes. Malinaw sa kanila who should be credited and therefore who should lead the nascent Philippine Republic.
And summoning as a witness of the rectitude of our intentions, the supreme judge of the universe, and under the protection of the mighty and humane North American nation, we proclaim and solemnly declare, in the name and by the authority of the inhabitants of all these Philippine islands, that they are and have the right to be free and independent, that they are released from all obedience to the Crown of Spain, that every political tie between the two is and must be completely severed and annulled, and that like all free and independent states, they have complete authority to make war, conclude peace, establish treaties of commerce, enter into alliances, regulate commerce, and execute all other acts and things that independent states have the right to do. Reposing firm confidence in the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge for the support of this declaration, our lives, our fortunes, and our most sacred possession, which is our honor. We acknowledge, approve, and confirm, together with the orders that have been issued therefrom, the dictatorship established by Don Emilio Aguinaldo, whom we honor as the supreme chief of this nation, which this day commences to have a life of its own, in the belief that he is the instrument selected by God, in spite of his humble origin, to effect the redemption of this unfortunate people.
O, diba? Talagang makikita din dito yung pagpapakahulugan nila sa freedom. I think at this point, mukhang specific talaga na freedom from the Spaniards. Kasi keb sila sa dictatorial government ni Aguinaldo at talagang very welcoming pa sa mga Amerikano.
Yeah, actually, very welcoming talaga. Pero dun sa point na dictatorial yung government, pero pwede rin natin kasing tingnan in context kasi, di ba, may war, di ba? So, baka pwedeng nakikita rin nila na walang time in the American liberal democratic model na may elections and so on, parang ang hirap din mag-hold nun kung nasa digmaan sila. Kaya baka pinaka-effective rin talaga yung diktatorya.
Yes, that makes sense actually. Pero maganda rin kung itatie back natin to sinasabi ko kanina about the nature of freedom as something that is relative. So, at this point, malaya sila Aguinaldo to govern, but how does this freedom translate in the experience of the people? I mean, later on, Apolinario Mabini would lament how revolutionaries abuse their fellow Filipinos.
Yun yung isang thing about history, di ba? Na dahil nga continuity siya, hindi tayo pwedeng mag-cherry pick kasi each event is related to another event. So, we can't look back at the revolution without, of course, going back to certain events and actions that, benefited the elite and no one else. Like, halimbawa, yung pack of biyak na bato, di ba? Like, after the quote-unquote tragedy of the revolution when Bonifacio was, executed by his brothers in the Katipunan, nagpatuloy naman yung labanan, diba? Nagpatuloy yung digmaan sa pagitan ng mga Espanyol at mga Pilipino. Pero later down the road, certain members of the elite, halimbawa, the likes of Pedro Paterno, would try to float ideas about brokering a deal between the revolutionaries and the Spaniards. Kaya nga yung popular scene sa Antonio Luna na movie, General Luna, although nangyari yun sa American period, dun mo makikita yung dynamics ng elite in a way and how they position themselves in times of conflict na sometimes mahirap din talagang hindi makita that they are working for themselves, diba? Kasi halimbawa, ano ba yung motivations nito ni Paterno at ng ibang elite kung bakit nila gusto na mag-strike ng deal na that would lead to this pack of biyak na bato na essentially yung ilang mga provisions ay may exile si Aguinaldo sa Hong Kong, tapos may ceasefire, tapos isusurrender yung arms, tapos magbabayad ng certain amount yung Spanish colonial government sa mga revolutionaries, tapos yung kalahati dadalhin ni Aguinaldo sa Hong Kong. May mga ganon siyang elements, di ba, na kailangan i-nuance din natin bakit nangyari yung ganon at sino yung nakinabang.
Saka kapansin-pansin din dito sa document na to, no, na they were envisioning freedom from abuse and oppression, pero halos walang banggit on the vision for economic and material prosperity para sa lahat. Considering tulad ng sinabi ni Agoncillo, karamihan sa foot soldiers ng revolusyon ay mga magsasaka na umaasang i-distribute nila yung mga friar estates. So, nabanggit nga ni Aaron na sino nga bang nagbe-benefit din talaga dito sa revolution at the end of the day? Kasi kung yung mismong aim ng revolution is for, equality or para talaga maiahon hindi lang sa abuses from Spain, kundi maiahon din yung mismong mga naghihirap dulot nitong relationship ng Pilipinas sa Espanya bilang kolonya.
Kaya nga 'di ba kung babalikan natin yung episode natin na kung papasa ka ba sa Katipunan, 'di ba yung mahalagang tanong dun sa membership rights ay anong lagay ng Pilipinas bago dumating ang mga Espanyol? Anong lagay ng Pilipinas pagdating ng mga Espanyol? At anong magiging lagay ng Pilipinas pag nawala ang mga Espanyol? 'Di ba yung idea dun ay may ginhawa at may liwanag nung bago dumating mga Espanyol na wala. Tapos, babalik ulit kapag ikaw ay nagtagumpay sa himagsikan. So, yung idea na hindi lang to political freedom, the Katipunan envisioned it na magbibigay ng ginhawa dun sa mga Tagalog, sa mga Pilipino na maghihimagsik. 'Di ba? So, ganun yung idea. Kaya nga din, halimbawa dito, I want to draw your attention, halimbawa dun sa regard sa mga Amerikano. Pwedeng understandable siya kasi tumulong sila talaga sa pagpapatalsik sa Espanya, although medyo questionable din yun. And this brings to mind the Battle of halimbawa yung Battle of Manila Bay and yung Battle of Manila that actually led to the Declaration of Independence. Kasi nung nagkaroon ng Spanish-American War, kasi the United States declared war against Spain nung lumubog yung isang American ship sa may Caribbean. Sinalakay ng mga Amerikano yung mga Espanyol. Tapos, dahil tayo ay technically under ng Spain pa rin, kasama tayo dun sa pwedeng salakayin. Kaya pinadala yung Asiatic Squadron ng US Army, ng US Navy sa Hong Kong na free port, diba? So, nandun yung mga Amerikano waiting in the wings kung anong mangyayari, waiting for orders kung sasalakay na yung Manila. At sino yung nasa Hong Kong nung time na yun, diba? Si Aguinaldo. So, nagsimula siya ng conversations with the Americans na baka pwedeng makipag-alyansa. So, syempre, itong mga Amerikano na at war with the Spaniards during that time and looking into defeating the Spaniards decisively, syempre kasama dun yung pag-seize ng mga territories ng Espanya. And then here you have someone claiming to be diba, from the point of view of the Americans, here you have someone, Aguinaldo, claiming to be the president of the revolutionary government, going to you and telling you na tulungan nyo ako, di ba? Siyempre parang golden opportunity yon para sa mga Amerikano na okay, ito na, bubuksan na yung daan para sa atin na makapasok tayo ng Pilipinas. So, mangyayari yung Battle of Manila Bay, matatalo yung mga Espanyol. Tapos, dahil complicated pa yung situation sa Manila, nag-decide yung mga Amerikano na sa Cavite mag-dock ng mga warships. So, doon sila nagpunta nung May 1898 towards the latter part. Kaya si Aguinaldo, nakabalik siya ng Pilipinas from exile from Hong Kong, sakay ng mga American warships. So kaya din, by the time na ongoing yung labanan, nakabalik siya ng Cavite. Kaya din sa Cavite, yung talaga naging site nung Declaration ng Independence, 'di ba? So later on, Aguinaldo would have disagreements with the Americans kasi hindi rin naging sure kung ano ba yung mangyayari. As early as June 1898, parang very accommodating siya dun sa mga Amerikano.
I would just like to point out then, what Aguinaldo so far is representing from the last episode until now. I think he really represents how the elite hijacked the revolution. Because Aguinaldo is still ilustrado, kumbaga bahagi pa rin siya ng elite, at mula nung makuha niya yung leadership ng Katipunan, yung trajectory tuloy ng revolusyon ay una, burahin yung Katipunan sa Declaration of Philippine Independence, tanggalin yung idea na makikinabang yung mas malawak na masa sa bagong sistema. At the same time, yung pakikipag-alyansa sa Estados Unidos without really analyzing what this alliance could mean. Kasi si Mabini, he was really very wary of the United States. Pero mukhang itong si Aguinaldo hindi rin naman nakinig kay Mabini.
At actually, hindi nga lang si Mabini, di ba? Decades before them, Rizal even cautioned everyone na dun sa kanyang essay na The Philippines within a century, yung Filipinas dentro de 100 anyo, Ang sabi niya talaga doon ay kung magkakaroon ng himagsikan sa Pilipinas, kailangan din mag-ingat yung mga revolusyonaryo kasi ang isang posibleng mangyari, mapatalsik man ng Espanya, ay posibleng may pumalit na kolonisador, 'di ba? At Rizal, being Rizal, na magaling, pinredict niya
Sabi niya kasi, nakapunta kasi ako ng Estados Unidos, nakita ko kasi.
Oo, alam ko lahat yan. So, diba dun sa essay, inassess niya yung mga colonial powers at that time Tapos sa assessment niya, parang hindi manggagaling dito sa mga European powers yung posibleng mag-take over sa Spain, diba? Ang warning ni Rizal ay yung rising superpower in the North American continent. Ganun niya dinescribe yung idea na parang, okay, baka pwedeng yung United States yung pumalit. Diba? So, decades before, may ganun ng apprehension yung si Rizal. Tapos, syempre, katulad ng sinabi ni Lee, si Mabini rin, na parang, teka, parang kailangan tayong mag-ingat, mag-isip-isip. Diba? Si Antonio Luna rin, ganyan, no? Tapos, biglang, boom, si Aguinaldo, hindi, friends.
Diba? Kung nagbasa sana si Aguinaldo ng Rizal, kahit yung mga sikat niyang essay, diba? So, siguro nagkaroon siya ng konting insight. But we know that Aguinaldo didn't read Rizal talaga. Talagang makikita mo din kung yung dahilan kung bakit Katipunan was left out and why America was given such emphasis on the Declaration of the Philippine Independence. Kasi crucial talaga yung ginampanan niyang role kung bakit nakabalik si Aguinaldo sa Pilipinas, halimbawa. Diba? Wala lang, parang kalimutan na lang that he actually tried to strike a deal with the colonizers at that period in the revolution when they were gaining momentum. Parang, di pala. Pero to be fair, may mga nagsasabi that Aguinaldo really didn't plan to surrender to Spain. Pumunta lang siya ng Hong Kong.
To reorganize, oo.
Mag-reorganize at mag-regroup at talaga namang kumukontak pa rin siya ng mga tao doon. Pero yun nga parang some source would say na hindi may momentum kayo Tapos you found this opportunity for, for some material gains. Kaya mo siya, tas ginrab mo naman. Pero binabanggit kanina yung role na ginampanan ng Estados Unidos at yung behavior na Aguinaldo towards them. Kaya itong isang part na to sa declaration, very interesting. Lagi ko itong pinopoint out sa mga estudyante ko.
And finally, it was unanimously resolved that this nation, independent from this day, must use the same flag used heretofore, whose design and colors and described in the accompanying drawing, with design representing in natural colors the three arms referred to. The white triangle represents the distinctive emblem of the famous Katipunan society, which by means of its compact of blood purged on the masses of the people to insurrection. The three stars represent the three principal islands of this archipelago, Luzon, Mindanao, and Panay, in which this insurrectionary movement broke out. The sun represents the gigantic strides that have been made by the sons of this land on the road of progress and civilization. Its rays represent the 8 provinces of Manila, Cavite, Bulacan, Pampanga, Nueva Ecija, Bataan, Laguna, and Batangas, which were declared in a state of war almost as soon as the first insurrectionary movement was initiated. And the colors blue, red, and white commemorate those of the flag of the United States of North America, in manifestation of our profound gratitude towards a great nation for the disinterested protection she is extending to us and will continue to extend to us.
This excerpt stands out to me kasi una, this is the only time na nabanggit ang Katipunan at inattribute sa movement yung white triangle sa ating flag. Ikalawa, this reveals a lot about the inaccurate symbolisms attributed to the Philippine flag. Kasi naalala ko nung grade school, ang sabi sa akin, blue is for peace, red is for courage, white is for purity. So, saan galing yung mga yan? Ayon sa primary source, galing yan sa flag ng United States of America.
So, di ba? Very foreshadowing na naging kolonya tayo ng United States after a few years. That's why it becomes worthwhile to revisit the role that the elite has actually played in the success of the new colonizers. Ako tingin ko, following Richardson, Aguinaldo was keen on getting the approval of other countries. So he wanted to prove to the world, especially to superpowers like America, that what they had was a modern functional republic.
Yeah, and such yearning for validation from outsiders lasted hanggang sa mga susunod na generasyon. Actually, kasi may political expedience din yung ganung move ni Aguinaldo. Kasi, di ba, when you declare an independence in the international system, another international player needs to recognize your independence. So maybe to his mind, ang idea niya ay, okay, kakaibiganin ko tong Amerika para may instant akong recognition kapag nag-declare ako ng independence. Pero, 'di ba, at the end of the day, parang hindi naging ganun yung sitwasyon kasi parang yun nga, ang kailangan ay lagi natin kailangang i-prove yung sarili natin. First from Spain and then later on sa United States. So parang laging dapat may pinapatunayan yung mga Pilipino against this, foreign powers.
Ako naman, I was thinking, how did Aguinaldo and his men perceive the United States and the role that they were to play in Philippine independence? Kumbaga, can we give Aguinaldo and the Filipinos then the benefit of the doubt for easily trusting the United States? Kasi, the US has this colonial experience and the revolutionary past. And could this be the reason why they were quick to trust the Americans na hindi sila bantay sa lakay or abanger moves lang? Inisip siguro nila, baka naman talagang benevolent itong mga Amerikano and they just really want to help.
Pero hindi kasi very fresh yung revolution parang kumbaga mainit pa yung nasyonalismo nung mga panahon na to. Kaya marami din naman talagang mga veterano ng Katipunan, halimbawa yung anti-American through and through.
Ako parang in a way, dun sa point ni Lee, parang dun mo rin makita yung galing ng United States sa pag-package ng kanyang sarili. I mean, in relation to Vex's point rin na malakas yung nasyonalismo, pero bakit may mga nasway? So, ibig sabihin, either may sarili rin silang interes, tapos naka-exacerbate pa yung packaging ng United States sa sarili niya. So parang itong mga to yung nagsasala-salabat ng mga factors kung that led to these events na hindi siya pwedeng sabihin natin black and white na natapos ang Spanish colonization, biglang dumating ang mga Amerikano. Parang hindi siya ganoon 'di ba? Kailangan yun yung isang take away din sa ganitong mga discussion na napaka-complex nung mga ganitong transition. Hindi siya nangyayari na parang tinanggal mo yung isang block at pinalitan mo ng isang block.
That's right. So, in this episode, nabalikan natin yung saysay ng isa sa mga pinakakinikilalang historical event sa bansa. And at the same time, nabusisi din natin yung pagpapalagay ng mga revolusyonaryo sa kasaysayan at sa tagumpay ng revolusyon. So, kung gusto nyo ng konting continuation, ako highly recommend General Luna kasi Filipino-American War to, available din sa Netflix.
So ayun, isa na namang very interesting discussion ang natapos natin. Next episode, dadako naman tayo sa American period na. At actually, medyo mag-fast forward tayo ng kaunti, Kasi ang pag-uusapan natin is the petition letter against the American Governor General Leonard Wood. At ano nga ba yung dynamics ng Philippine politics under the United States noong panahon na ito?
Yeah, so don't forget, of course, to follow our social media pages at syempre don't also forget to visit our website podcast.org for more content.
So also don't forget to share our episodes to your friends and to your classmates para mas madami pa tayong magkakakwentuhan. So muli, maraming salamat sa pakikinig. See you next weekend and have a good day!